Okay, well, I'm hoping Tyson's gonna be running in, but, we do now have a quorum, so I would like to call a meeting to order. It is April 27th, and we are here at Huntsville Town Hall for a planning commission meeting. Could you please all stand for the pledge of allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Here it comes. The man. It's the legend. Okay. Hey, good.
I'm missing. I got a chair.
Okay, we'll have like just take a quick moment of silence before we begin. Okay, thank you very much. The first item on the regular business is approval of minutes. We don't have those minutes yet. In order to approve them, that's fine, but we're going to go ahead and move on. Today we have a presentation from the Agricultural Committee on agritourism, and we have Ian Houghton here. And to help us to present that for us. So Ian, I'm just gonna turn the time over to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
I gave you co-host so you can share anything you want.
Real quick share here.
You want to turn off one of these lights so you don't have to flare, you guys good?
Okay. Think so.
That what we're looking at, that's the document I shared with you. So I'm assuming you all had a chance to read this planning commission. So basically, I'll give you a little backstory. This is coming from a position of looking at the valley as a community and the intent of the general plan, which is to support support agriculture as sort of core rural asset of this community and really the long history of it. That's very well documented in the general plan. It's generally going to inform everything we do at the planning commission level. And so agritourism is not a new concept, but it's been, I think, well marketed in a good way recently to people understanding what it can do to support agriculture. And really what it does is enable new business opportunities on existing properties. So you can support long-term agricultural producers to stay on their land in the face of development pressures, economic challenges, environmental and government challenges, all of which producers in Ogden Valley are facing. And so that's the premise of why we're actually talking about this. So you can see in the various sections, we probably won't need to necessarily read through it all if you've been through, but there's a sort of a purpose and intent, and then some core policy ideas of really going to come down to definition. What is a farm? What is legitimate agriculture? And as much as anything, getting into an eligibility situation where someone could, with the wrong incentives, want to be seen as an agricultural producer so that they could take advantage of some of the benefits that you as a group and the community are going to be offering someone who is a legitimate agricultural producer. So as an example, one of the biggest issues is access to housing, which we're going to talk about in a bit about ADUs. But in particular, there's a way of doing additional housing on a legitimate agricultural property that will serve the needs of that property in terms of access to farm workers in a temporary seasonal basis, or in particular when it comes to agritourism, bringing people onto your property that are interested in paying money to experience what it is that you do, whether that's helping with production, educational opportunities, learning about soil health and soil construction, animal management, doing a grow up, managing, large scale vegetable production on your property, teaching them how to do it on their property, those kinds of things. So these are all things that people pay money for. There's a very good example in the ranch environment. There's a ranch up in Cache Valley. Chris, do you happen to remember the name?
Monument,
No, the
Golden Hour.
Golden Hour, yeah. So this is an ex-basketball player from the U, I think, that was in Europe for a while, came back to his heritage, wanted to be a rancher, so they had a large property and cattle, hay fields, just what you see here in the valley, which is an excellent economic model for the valley and for Cache Valley, but a more challenging one with increasing property prices and all those market pressures. What they've added is a tourism piece where you can bring your horse or your family on horseback or use their horses. And at sunrise, go out essentially cruising around this property on horseback, seeing, mother cows with their new calves in this beautiful environment with snow caps in the background. They're making like 40% of their revenue on their ranch from doing that. And it almost costs them nothing. They already have the cows, they already have the grass, they already have the farm, and people are just paying to come and look at it. And that's almost an ideal example. That same model could absolutely work on properties here in the valley with enough scale. Certain properties, obviously not, if you got 10 acres, that's probably not it. But if you got 100, 200, something like that, we have multiple properties at that scale. That's just one example. So there's just a whole range of activities that can be enabled, but there are some privileges that come with giving somebody the ability to have essentially an agritourism permit. One of them is the ability to construct that housing. Most of the others, if you read through this document, are operational in terms of things that you can do on your property in terms of special events, bringing people onto your property that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate because it's essentially a commercial enterprise. So you're running a business, and yet here we are, 83 zone all over the valley, which implies residential. And yet you've got big chunks of agricultural land that have that same zoning, and we're going to enable them to do things that on paper, if it was small lot, would interfere or at least affect their neighbors. But because they're on bigger lots, they can do things. And we're basically giving them an okay to do that because they don't necessarily have neighbors right next door. And in the future, if things change, they're still going to have the ability to do that. Because if you are the Johnny come lately and you move into be next to them, and it's this legitimate ranch operation, farm operation, and you're going to come in and be the person that says, wow, I love the pretty postcard rural Ogden Valley, but I don't like the smell of animals, and I don't like this, and I don't like that. We're basically saying, that's on you. So that's what you as a community have decided in the general plan that we're going to okay, that we're going to support agricultural producers maintaining this rural ag supported economy, and that they're going to be able to make money at it the way they always have, and some new ways through agritourism with, to be fair, some constraints, because you have, I come from a planning commission background. I was on the Ogden City Planning Commission for 8 or 9 years, and all your issues as you're discovering happen at the boundaries between a zoning change. So you go from AV3 to, oh look, there's condos right next door. So suddenly you've got high density, that kind of conflict, you're going to have a lot more issues there than between two AV3 properties over here that are both 50 acres doing the same thing. They're like, we're good neighbors, we do the same stuff. So that's the kind of place where we as a group are going to have to really think about how the ordinances are written, how agritourism integrates into different sizes of properties, and just as importantly, different locations throughout the valley. So that's the gist of where we are. So I think I probably should open it up to questions from all of you, insights, concerns. We have an official planner in the room. I'm sure he's got some comments. You want to do that?
yeah. Do they have any questions so far?
That was a lot of me yakking, so.
No, that's good. Do they may have any questions for Ian so far? Brian, do you have any questions so far?
No.
Okay, yeah, Angela.
Yeah, I thank you for this document. It's really great overarching goals are very clear. I think where I'm stuck in this role is how do you find that hard line in terms of text that can guide planners and commissioners into what constitutes approval quality or not, because I see the criteria here, but it's also on the other hand saying, we want to keep it with us, we don't want to tell them how to do and what to do.
Right.
But you need an ordinance.
Right.
You need something that's measurable, and it also helps an applicant to know that if I have this idea, I can look at the ordinance and go, yeah, I can meet these things.
Right, what's the bar you have to clear?
I'm gonna go that way. If
Yeah,
it's too
perfect.
vague, unknown, they're not gonna put any effort, try, because well, I'll probably get shot down, it's too cumbersome. So
Right.
I think the clarity helps both sides in a lot of ways. So I guess that's where I'm stuck with keeping it flexible and open, but yet giving the decision makers enough guidance and tools that it's not strictly subjective.
Right, so this was a lot of it here, like item 7, regulating measurable impacts is kind of a key thing.
Right, so what,
So
so
that-
that's where, what do you take from this and how do you then,
Like break it down.
what is the judgment then of traffic? What is the judgment of?
Right, that's where the detail has to come in, so part of the challenge here is not handing you a 30-page document with all that kind of detail. And I know Brian got a lot on his plate, but my thought was that this is really gonna be considered more of a white paper guidance. So this is big picture of what we're trying to accomplish, we need to agree on the goals first before getting lost in the minutia. And then once we've done that, yes, we agree, we wanna see agritourism as a tool. We agree that we have to deal with the ramifications at the borders in terms of different zones. We agree that there's a list of requirements we want people to have. We don't want it so egregious that they can't do it, but it has to be. You gotta catch the cheaters, and there's a bunch of reasons why people will wanna cheat on this. So with those being the overarching goals, then you can get into the detail, but as I was important to agree on all that first.
So that would be a next step to
The next
flesh out
step.
some of those details.
Right.
Okay, one of my questions is, when we talk about the potential for lodging, I mean, in my experience, areas that are doing agritourism, lodging has a much more broad spectrum than other areas, right? So I envision numerous places I've been, but if I look up at Dancing Moose, they have yurts.
Perfect example.
They don't have,
Yeah.
they aren't impacting water, they aren't impacting septics, they use porta potties on site for those things, and so that's a different picture than if somebody wants to build, you know, a 6-room bunkhouse or with bathrooms and showers or things like that. I think that's a whole different picture. I've seen, I stayed in North Dakota, was hauling a horse to Maryland, and we stayed overnight in at a little place that did agritourism, a lovely farm, and they had 2 cabins that did have a bathroom and running water. They were small, but they had a shower, no food capability. And then they had 3 or 4, they were really cool, these little A-frame camping things that you could either, they were wood, they were substantial, and you could raise the top and, you know, it would stay up and you could have be plein air if you wanted with a cover, kind of a glamping kind of a mentality. Or if it was cold where you were worried about bugs or bear or whatever, you could put the top down and it looked like a, you know, a solid tent, A-frame tent. But my point is, when we talk about what those items are, it feels like that has to be fleshed out too, because in my mind, it's like, okay, if you're gonna build, if you wanna build something that has the potential at some point to be questioned, well, can I just rent this out on a more regular basis? That's a whole different matter if it's got a kitchen and a shower and a bath, all those things that someone could actually live there more long term, then I think that impacts, well, okay, now what is that capability? How much property do you have to do that? And do you need, do you need enough, when we get to the pieces about TDUs, okay, you're turning in TDUs in order to do these things, and that makes sense. But if you're doing yurts or things that are more glamping, that's a whole different matter, because it isn't impacting water and wastewater and things like that. Can you help?
Yeah.
That at all?
There's two different discussions. So you've got the ADU question. and it's three, ADU, SDR, and ag housing.
Okay,
So those all kind of can mush together in a bad way. We let that happen. And the goal, I think as I understand it, is that there's serious concern correctly in the community about STR creep. So anything you build becomes a potential for STR. This whole state mandate on SB 284 for ADU construction is legit in the sense that it's trying to support the housing need. But if you watch carefully what say people in certain businesses would push for, they're going to build massive houses and essentially double the density of the valley with no benefit to the population that bill attempts to help, which is elderly, low income, young families starting out, singletons, people working in local businesses, right? That's what they say. And so that implies small and inexpensive is what you need to be building so that they can rent it in somewhere that those people could afford it. And so you're not building a 3,000 square foot ADU on a property. But to your point, if you're building something, and I did have a conversation with Chris about this, but to maybe have him speak to something like the bunkhouse you mentioned, where maybe there is no kitchen because you're eating communally in this agricultural space in some other way. So it's not a house and it could never be repurposed as a short-term rental in that way. It's like, well, who's going to rent a place without a kitchen? My point was to give permission to producers to build agricultural housing that supports their needs as producers.
or even an overnight or an overnight stay, I think potentially, as long as it is part of that agritourism experience,
Correct.
not, oh, we're the agritourism experience isn't like I could sleep in the middle of a field and look at the stars.
That's not
or
that's
see a cow, that's not really
That's right. That's
the
that's
agritourism
fake
experience.
agritourism.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's the difference.
That's helpful.
So that's the part of the challenge though is to Angela's point is how do you define that?
Mhm.
And so it's a degree of experience or interaction. It's how you spend your time and energy for the time that you're on site, engaging quote unquote with agriculture. What does that mean? So we will have to flesh that out. We're not the first ones here. So we're not plowing a new furrow here. This is something that other people have done.
So it's also my understanding that agritourism isn't necessarily sleepovers. I mean,
No.
there's a much larger component
That's all.
of agritourism, and that is, but potentially one of the most controversial, right? I know Chris did kid camps. Nobody spent the night, but what a fantastic experience
My kid loved it.
for kids to be there. So, but I guess from my perspective, it's like, we're talking about, when we talk about the housing component, the sleepover type component, whatever that looks like, that's really a pretty small piece, while it is potentially controversial and very, very important because, okay.
Most of agritourism, I suspect, in the beginning, will not include people building housing because it's the most expensive thing you could do.
Right.
And it's seasonal. I mean, are you doing anything in November? Are you doing anything in February? Probably not. So how much of the year are you really getting value out of that to your business? But when it's on in the summer, most likely, it can be really helpful. But you have to have built your business already to enable other revenue streams so that those people are going to want to be on site. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, not to go into too many farming analogies, but yeah.
Are there, I think, if I'm trying to think of a couple of examples, of what is currently happening in the valley that to me fit within that realm. I mean, I think of Dancy Moose
Mhm.
and their yurts. Have you guys been by? Do you know where Dancy Moose is?
It's up by Kazi, the turn to Kazi, they're here.
Right, so we get Kazi on the right side. They also let the marathon start there, the Ogden Marathon starts there. But I mean, I think they do some like corporate, like ag retreats where they bring groups in, things like that.
They'll bring experts in the agricultural space and do a seminar on site. We're gonna learn all about permaculture, using worms and building soil and do it right there. Because they have all the animals, all the infrastructure. It's a perfect way to do it. It's kind of thing that, Chris can do on his.
Right, and I was gonna mention him in a minute, but then on a small scale, is it also agritourism? And I haven't had the pleasure of meeting them yet, right over where you turn to go over Trappers Loop, the family, they have a bed and breakfast and they do farm to table dinners and they have a very small scale farm.
Glenn and Bonnie.
Yeah, is that also
Yeah,
agritourism?
Yeah, that's it. So
Okay.
the challenge, of course, will be that's a 1.5 acre property, which is very much on that low end scale of what could be done. But
Your house
look,
is a
they're
bed and
squeezing
breakfast
them- well, they
already,
have
because they're zoned for that.
grandfather bed and breakfast,
Mhm.
so that's
Okay.
unusual. But it's unlikely that they would have been permitted in the way we're talking about to build housing on a lot
Yeah.
that small. But here we are. They
But
have-
absent housing, it's still agritourism.
It is. They have greenhouses. They are both retired educators. Their plan is to evangelize this kind of agricultural development.
Okay.
To get people to support their own themselves from their own farm and then
Okay.
spread it into the community. So they're
Okay.
very much that.
And I'm just trying to wrap my head
Sure.
around the whole big picture of what all of that entails, and since. I think Chris is on the committee, do you want him to help share with your presentation since he came? Do you want him to speak to some things? He's on the committee, and it's the
Yeah.
committee that's presenting.
I'll give a, just quick history.
Yeah.
So we have an agricultural advisory committee. Within that committee, there are multiple subcommittees. One of them is sort of land use and zoning, which has been feeding your discussion about concerns from an ag perspective. Another one is gonna be water irrigation infrastructure, because that's what people fight about in the West is water. And then the other one is kind of a catch-all right now, but initially education, economic development, agritourism. Those are all kind of what we're talking about right now. And so Chris is on that subcommittee as I am. And so if you would maybe speak to how you see some of these challenges for, as opposed to tiny little yurts and things, what else would be appropriate without opening the door to massive house construction, because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a specific type.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started talking about all this, what was presented was, there was a lot of regulations with, maybe you regulate what goes inside the house, how big it is, maybe it's a minimum square footage, things like that, but I had a lot of pushback on almost all of it. And where we really kind of came back to it was, it's gonna come down to fair how an agricultural producer is, which is, I think, our next biggest hurdle is gonna be is how you qualify to be an ag producer, what's our qualifications, but my biggest thing was that we were getting lost in the weeds with all the regulation of what's gonna happen, whereas I felt like that's where your killer is. When you do over-regulation, then what you do is you get the honest producers, they can't do it, and then the guys at the deep pocket would step up and they can pay people to get that job done. And then you're not getting the honest guys that can't do it. I mean, guys that are doing it right now, Jason's here, he's has a rental he's been fighting with for I don't know how many years. He has a high tunnel. You see him at every single event, selling vegetables, selling stuff. He's a qualified person. There's no reason he should have an agritourism operation on this farm. There is, we were talking about size. I was like, yeah, I might have little tiny off-grid places on my place, but then at the same time, I want something bigger because I might get me a good crunchy little family that is a family of 4 or 5 or 6 that want to bring all their kids in there and they want to cook their own. When me and my family go on vacation, we bring all our own food. We cook for ourselves. We use some credit card points to go to a fancy hotel, and they were blown away that we were packing a giant cooler into this hotel. No one at that hotel would have done that. And so we do. We bring all of our own food. We ship our meat to wherever we're going on vacation, so we can eat our own meat. This is what we do. So we can attract families like that. So size regulations wouldn't work. Things going inside there, that wasn't going to work. It was like, well, if there's a double oven or if there's this and that, and it kind of is like, well, you're using it for something bigger. Maybe it is. Maybe I've got a wedding going on. Maybe it is a family reunion and they're trying to cook for their entire family and they need to be able to buy this stuff. So a lot of the regulations, my biggest thing, I guess, was I think all of our work needs to go into how do we qualify an agricultural producer and then take the handcuffs off a little bit.
Yeah.
Because so many different things work. I could have right next to at the same time, it was at the beginning, it was maybe not having standalone units. That wasn't gonna work for me. The last thing I'm gonna do after farming all day is go share my house with some strangers. I love talking. You'll see me in the parking lot of the grocery store talking with everyone forever. I'm a master at this, but my privacy is my privacy. When I'm home with my family, I don't want to be looking at strangers doing that. So I want standalone units, but I also don't want standalone units that are maybe right in the middle of the farm. Because at the same time, I share a fence with mosquitoes at work, and I have a beautiful forest in the back of the property. Maybe I want a unit that is back up in there in the trees that gives a family a little bit of privacy while they're on vacation, and they still are on the farm. My cows will be grazing past there. My pigs will be in the forest, and
So help me understand. We need to separate that from short-term rental. What is the agricultural experience other than just being in the midst of it, what is the experience that they are going to have there in different settings, not just you, but.
That's, I mean,
But
that's something that.
that's important to distinguish when you wanna, because we need to distinguish this from
Yeah.
short-term rentals.
We do, and it's hard because at the same time, what I wouldn't wanna do is handcuff my guests by saying, the only way you can stay here is you have to do this and this and this on my property. Me and my family will go do some of these farm stays, and sometimes we don't participate in the farm, but it's the fact that we know that we're on a farm and we're supporting a farmer, and that money's going to them. And we'd much rather do that than spend our money at a Motel 6 or something else, because it's our way of knowing that we're still providing and helping an agriculture community where we go. But at the same time, I'm on my one vacation a year, I may not wanna go and do a farm experience, I may want to just go and do my touristy, but I'm staying on a farm because it's my way of supporting the farm. So that's the part that that's another part that's hard, I mean, I can play devil's advocate on a lot of things, but to almost handcuff your guests as being like, well, you can stay here, but you have to come garden with me, or you have to come do this. At the same time, I get guests that don't wanna get money or monkey, but they wanna get a farm, they wanna walk around the farm and see a farm and do stuff, but they may not want to actually get soil underneath their fingernails.
Yeah.
And they may, we get some kind of people that do that stuff, so yeah, we would walk around and talk education, I mean, and that'll probably be a little part of everything, it's at the same time they come stay. We'll probably there is gonna be some kind of sign or something in their room that talks about where they're at, what they're supporting. You know, there is gonna be an educational aspect with every single person that stays, but to tie them down that they have to participate in some kind of agricultural activity, maybe a little bit. At the same time, everyone and their dog will wanna do something, but some people may not, and I don't, you know, that's our part on that.
Okay,
Where is your place first?
I'm over at Liberty, yes.
I mean, personally, I'm less hung up on they have to be involved with the farming or education. I mean, it's an income stream. We're trying to support the farmers with non-traditional income streams, right?
Right,
To allow
right.
them to
So the
keep
slippery
it
slope
profitable.
is
But
what, sorry.
what I'm hung up on is this, like, as she says, the short-term rental piece, the density piece,
Mhm.
right? I don't think we can throw that out the window in any one particular case. So, but it sounds like we might not have to. It sounds like there are a lot of other activities. There's a lot of like temporary yurts or the bunkhouse piece or other ways that this could be structured where we're still supporting. But not.
Without opening.
At this point, you know, maybe there's some incremental steps that we go through,
Mhm.
but I think right now where we are, where we still haven't even tackled or had any discussions about our valley-wide short-term rental component.
Or
I think
TDRs.
it's premature for us to start maneuvering here.
Yeah, that's why this is that conversation.
Yeah.
Inform that conversation, which is a
Right.
larger overall valley housing issue between ADUs, TDRs, FTRs, and too many TLAs, as I'm going, 3 other acronyms.
But knowing that currently, I mean, bed and breakfasts are allowed, there's other means they could have
Right.
guests on the properties currently within their base zones.
Mhm.
In terms of the family compound, they could cluster develop, just
Mhm.
like they could if in any other case, so that essentially covers the family compound situation without adding density, still build that density, you have those TDRs currently, even without a program to exchange, I believe. Right, if you had a 40-acre parcel, say, you could build 13 units or something,
Yeah.
right? So I
and
think
I think
that,
also if they're in Forest Valley, you can, in the Forest Valley area, they can have bed and breakfasts. So if you had enough land to be able to build another dwelling under your TDRs, but you know, then you have the whole, I'm building a whole nother place. And you've got all the septic and all those things that you have to address, but I mean, I think there's some property owners, it's gonna make more sense that they can figure out how to put that housing in based on what is currently existing, but others, I think we're gonna have to, I think we're gonna have to dig into this and find out what parameters are gonna need, how to.
Well, for that agritourism piece, for example, if you've got a larger property, that proverbial 40-acre piece, then if you're gonna be legitimately agritourism, then there, by definition, there is still agriculture, which means you
Right.
must be clustering. It's not you may, at that point you shall. because that's the whole point of this. And so.
Can't work in farm, yeah.
Right, can't work farm if it's all cut up into 3 acre boxes, right? They're too big to mow and too small to farm.
For sure.
So,
I think too, the way, what I keep thinking is, we have to set this up in a way that it's explainable to other people.
Mhm.
So that you don't become a target, right? And people are like, well, they get to do it, why don't we, right? I just think that's where the clarification comes in.
there's a fairness perception.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we maintain that.
Agreed.
Well, that's the part we need to have down next, because what you do is you get cheaters on there that say, oh, I'm an agritourism operation, they have one beehive. Right, well, you have to sell the public, well, I sell one sugar public,
That's not,
and now I get an ADU. And so it's definitely trying to figure that out, that's gonna be our next biggest hurdle is,
Right.
what is our qualifications, because at the same time, farming and ranching is so different with the way every single person does it. It's gonna be hard to wrangle us all in to these criteria, that's gonna be, I think, our biggest challenge, I think this framework was just more or less presenting of like, hey, once they're a producer, this is the things we think that you should be allowed to do. Now our next big hurdle is who is a producer, because a lot of the language, even in the codes and stuff, that everyone was hung up with the animals, the amount of animals and stuff, but then right at the end of that, there was that little sentence that said, this does not apply for agricultural producers. Who is an agricultural producer?
Right.
That's
Well,
what the
and
code and zoning, we don't, none of us even know what that is, and who that is.
And I definitely wanna say thank you for you guys for coming and talking to us, because I think this committee is incredibly valuable and incredibly important. And I have, we've all known it was in the works and it just needed to get up and going with the right people and all the things. And I really wish it had been up earlier so we could have had that input from the committee in earlier zones that we had pushed through, but we'll straighten them all out and we'll get it all fixed.
the big
I
risk,
think that,
one quick comment, the big risk with this, and again, not to focus on the housing, but it is the source of all the problems between them.
it is,
Yeah, ADUs, STRs and all that. And so that's why it's a key topic of conversation, that we don't want to open the door to this and then have to claw it back. This is what happened in Bozeman, it's what happened in Park City, and in the document that I emailed you this morning, if you haven't had a chance to read that, there's a bunch of examples with all the links on these communities that have destroyed themselves by essentially opening this door, and then it's double STR on everything. So there's no owner occupied requirement on their ADUs, for example. You have to require the owner to be on site, period. Or investors will buy your town and monetize the 2 rentals, and they can afford it, and your local people can't, and boom, you get that.
right,
And so that's, that's a different topic, obviously, but it's related to this, because
Sure.
for a small property, they may just determine if, let's say you're a 3 acre person who wants to do agritourism, that's plenty of land to do a lot of really legitimate, farming on 3 acres. You can farm on half an acre if you're paying real attention to it. And so having an ADU, which the state now is saying you can, if you're gonna build an ADU, you may decide, or we may decide, that it doesn't make sense to allow an ADU and agricultural housing on anything smaller than 3 acres. Right, that might be where we end up.
But it also sounds like, just from some of your comments, that you too may have, at least you have an idea in your mind of what legitimizes
Oh, yeah.
somebody for agritourism, so maybe your next step is to define that for us. Well, you're involved enough in it that you can say, they only have one beehive, that to us doesn't feel right. But so if that's true, then what does feel right?
Right.
Yeah, I feel like current planners, future commissions may or may not have any experience in ag and be told something is the case, and
And that's
they
why we
need
have a
hard and
committee.
fast criteria to understand and be objective. Evaluation.
Question. Guys, the existing ordinance that's out there for agritourism, have you guys looked at that?
Meaning the county. Or-
Yes.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of metrics out there, setbacks, things like that.
Mhm. Some of which are appropriate for the valley in general,
Yes.
not to be critical of government in the past,
Right.
but the easy out when, as I used to say when I was on planning, when everybody and their grandfather had 40 acres, because that's the kind of chunk you could buy, you could burn stuff, dump stuff, shoot stuff, and nobody cared. We don't live there anymore. You're allowed to build an ADU on an 11,000 square foot lot. it's gonna affect your neighbor. Anything you do on your little farm is gonna affect your neighbor. So we have to think about it differently.
The county one wasn't up by any means perfect. One of the biggest things we battled with was their definition of farm stands. We were trying to do a farm stand this time, and what they were saying was basically the smaller of an operation you were, the less you could carry your farm stand. So we had a very large presence, a very large following. At that time, we were only on a 2.5 acre piece of property. Mind you, that 2.5 acre property, we were feeding over 30 families with what we were raising on there, just in beef and meat production. But our farm stand, we were only allowed to carry what we produced in our farm. So therefore, I couldn't carry stuff from other producers in the valley who maybe don't have a good following and don't have that presence. You know, if I've got Jewel Blood over there selling soap, I couldn't put some of her soap in my farm stand. But if you had over 40 acres, you could sell anything you want. And like handcuffs like that was a little bit like, well, so it's a privilege. If I don't have enough money to be able to get to this level, I can't sell things to provide and support my community. That's the biggest thing we're about, is supporting community, bringing in other agricultural operations and helping. But then because at that time, that was our very first kind of starter farm in the valley, we had a huge following, but we couldn't support other people in our little stand because of that. So there's things like that that kind of was.
So there's always a reason for a rule, and the reason is that they don't want somebody deciding
If
as.
somebody took advantage,
Well,
and
somebody
if
takes
somebody
advantage.
took advantage, then we have to make a rule, and the rule has unintended
Right,
consequences.
exactly. So we gotta get ahead of the unintended. And in this case, they were trying to prevent somebody from essentially out competing with Chris by going to Costco, buying a bunch of vegetables, opening a farm stand and saying, hey, look at that vegetable. It's like, dude.
Like car, like
You don't
cars,
get the
they're
privilege.
not.
Yeah, there's people in the Ogden Farmers Market who do that.
Yes.
It's contentious to say the least.
So
So
there's.
this is why we actually started the vetting process, which I helped out last year, which was, I was one of a couple farmers and people that were applying for the market. We actually went to their farms and had to be shown the operation. And I was at, because of a couple of players that were buying Costco apples and then selling them at the market, which was very obvious when you would go home and milk the wax off the apple, and they were a small producer.
Right.
So therefore, we could then go and I could see what they were doing, like, great, how many markets you signed up for? You're signed up for X amount of markets, which will provide X amount of that stuff. I see X amount of trees. The math isn't mapping, and then we were able to kind of start flushing people out this way. But I could also see how us going and looking at these farms on end, that I guess could become, someone could claim, oh, well, that person doesn't like me, and that's why I didn't do it. But that's kind of where we're leaning right now, is I feel like there is, within the ag community, it's almost gonna be like, if you want to do this agritourism, there needs to be a tour and because we can flush it out. People who are farmers aren't gonna be able to get that flushed out, but us producers, you can flush it out like that if you're a little slow.
So if you've got a farm stand, the requirement's gonna be, you can sell things from the valley. Doesn't just have to be you gotta sell one thing from you, because then you, the producers, are gonna be competing with people who are like retail marketing aces. And that's their business, that's good for them, but that doesn't really help the ag community. And so by enabling people to sell other people's product, there's gonna be, I'm sure, producers in the valley, oh, I don't wanna deal with the public, I don't wanna sell stuff, but I wanna make stuff. So you can work together and have a team effort, and yet everybody will succeed in this production environment. So that's where we.
There's enforcement too.
Right, there is an important, oh, that's right, and probably driven by a committee like we're talking about through this subcommittee on the ag committee, it would be, we're gonna go out and vet before you get this agritourism permit or permit to have a farm stand. You're doing 500 pounds a week of strawberries and you've got 8 square feet of strawberry plants, I'm thinking that's not real. Oh, yeah, right,
How do we institutionalize that knowledge within the planning department, right? So that
documentation.
people like, I mean, but what is the legal structure of that? Because within the city, are they consultants? Are they employees? Are they just, giving
Volunteers.
advice casually? And, I'd like to hear from you, Brian, from an administrative perspective. How do you see taking these concepts, creating an ordinance out of them that you can then partake in?
I mean, it's certainly possible to do. There are other communities that do this sort of thing, but it comes down to, it does come down to staff time. If you put together a list of requirements that need to be met, and then every business has to go through an inspection and evaluation of appropriate documentation,
And then
certainly, you could put together a fee structure to put those application costs onto the applicant. based on how many hours you anticipate will be necessary for staff to conduct inspections. Any other type of coordination that's necessary. I mean, that's how we do building permits. You know, when a building permit comes in, they pay a building
So
fee, a building permit fee. So it depends on how much you want to charge for permits and how much time you want to have people
so
evaluating them.
would it be possible, by the way, first of all, I wanna say, I appreciate your presentation in the form of white paper, because it feels like you're here to educate me on what the big picture of ag tourism can be. And I don't, and I appreciate not having a draft ordinance put in front of me.
Right.
That I haven't had a chance to think about. So I appreciate the first step, and then maybe next steps, or, you know, next steps certainly, and maybe development of some matrices that are going to help us figure out, you know, what do all these things mean. But Brian, is it possible to, if we develop something that has those components, that is part of the ordinance and approved by the city council, isn't it potentially feasible that the city council could in some fashion deputize, you know, or make a group of people, a small group or a group of people who they say, you're authorized to do some of these inspections, and then it would not take as much planner time, because your planners aren't necessarily ag producers that understand it with the depth and breadth of knowledge that the producers do. I mean, so is there a blend that we can do? It's like, here, go out and check the boxes, and if the city council says, this is our group that's gonna go out and check this, and if they say yes, then the planner does the next piece. I don't know.
Ag advisory committee does the inspection.
Exactly.
I think it would be hard to expect a planner. I mean, I had an experience over my irrigation water where somebody from the county attorney's office had to come look, and it's like they absolutely understood nothing about how irrigation water works, and so they couldn't make a good decision. I don't know that we're going to have a planner on staff that really understands the nuances of farming in the valley.
Well,
So I
one
think
way to
it's
think
going
about
to
it
be important. I think the county's done that, because like when you talk about trails, the county had other, you know, they decided to add somebody, you know, to their essentially staff on a hourly basis or whatever, you know, to provide input. I mean, I don't know how that would roll out, but it's.
I think it's a numbers game. I mean, in his example, which is a good one, building permits, there's constant building.
Absolutely.
There's gonna be constant building.
So we'd also
You couldn't
like to
expect that
keep
to
the
be a
permit
volunteer.
price. I think the council would make that final decision. We don't have any influence on
Right.
permit prices, but I'd hate to see the permit, the cost be so high that the permits made it prohibitive. Certainly a reasonable price for a
I think it wants to be nominal. I mean, anything, you know, if you
I
want to
mean,
set it
fair,
down,
but not exorbitant to the
Right.
point that it.
not to the point where it pays for the planner's time, that doesn't make sense.
But it-
The community has decided that they value this, so then we as a community should fund it at some level, but they should pay a nominal fee. And then I think, as Chris said, the ag advisory committee with the expertise on that committee would go and do the vetting and then issue a report, and they're volunteers. And
That's
this,
the same. Can't you just do it on a volunteer basis?
yeah, exactly, that
As
aspect.
long as they were vetted as being
Right.
viable.
How are you legit? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
and legitimate.
Yeah.
And I think it would be advisory, it wouldn't be a final
Correct.
determination.
And then it would have to-
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
And then the fine would say, but that would be a lot less to do for that planning person. It's like, it's been vetted as an agricultural entity. Now there's the health and safety, traffic management, the usual pending issues. Those are much easier checkboxes for somebody who's a professional. That is what they know. They're not gonna know the farming stuff. So we fixed that by putting those two together. And now the fees don't have to cover all that time of educating yourself about the ag piece. It's the stuff. you're-
So would that role
I think
also include
It makes
compliance?
sense. I have concerns over liability and objectivity.
Of course.
That would need to be, I think absolutely, we need an attorney's final opinion on this.
And to Angela's point, what's the hard list? Is it a hard list or is it, okay, there's these 11 things that are factors and you're.
When you're
Okay,
making, but when you're making a land use authorization, you need to be as objective as possible, and you need to be as detailed as possible in terms of why something complies versus why another one doesn't. I'm not aware of examples of similar volunteer groups providing that service. Perhaps a contractor could provide it on an hourly basis. Where the city hires through an open and competitive job advertisement, where they hire where they hire a third party to come and make those evaluations. But
Mostly for the objectivity reasons.
yeah, absolutely. It's that impartiality and certainly having, expert opinion is important, but I think the key issue would be impartiality. If you've got people within the community that are not elected officials and not even, well, I mean, I guess they could be appointed officials, but they're not elected officials, so they're making administrative decisions on, who gets a permit and who doesn't.
Slippery slope.
It could be seen as anti-competitive. It could be seen as arbitrary, and
Not like your neighbor farmer, so.
Right, person, you can't have that.
So for the matter at hand in turning this vision and these great concepts into something over the next few weeks, literally, we have just a few weeks left to get something forward to the council to vote on.
But the May 14th hard deadline, is that right?
What's that?
Is that a May 14th head hard deadline?
I think we could have another public hearing on the 26th and still make our deadline. But the notice for that would have to be, so we're still maybe 3 weeks at most before we have to put something forward to public hearing, right?
yeah.
So in that time, is there a temporary stop that's going to be an improvement? Get out the gate with something that addresses some of these concerns that everybody can agree upon, knowing that we're going to continue work and possibly come back with some revisions over the next months.
Yeah, I think that's realistic. I think we want to enable people, who are in business, trying to support their families and do this without opening up the opportunity for abuse. So I think the big one again is the housing thing. So we can kind of kick that to the curb in the sense that we've got these big concepts. This is what we think it's for. There's some refinement in terms of scale and size of construction versus lot size or whatever. Those are probably the biggest ones. And then just some of the scope of that, but basically saying, yes, that's a thing. All these other aspects, which really deal with special event management, CSAs, farm stands, all these other ways of making money that are much more immediate, meaning lower capital costs. You're not building something other than a farm stand, which is very valuable. We'd like to enable those as soon as possible. It's April and growing season is on, so we really need some.
The group to focus.
We will,
on those and
exactly.
Kind of ordinance proposal language. So first looking at what the sticking points are in our current ordinance. You mentioned a few. Let's get, clean up the things that are problematic, insert those farm stand and other issues that will help in the short term. So that we can get something out the door in the next few weeks and then continue this discussion and work. Does that seem reasonable? Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but
No,
It's a fair request. I'll take it back to our group, but I suspect they're all highly motivated for the same thing.
and how about the housing piece? Are we hoping they'll come back with,
Well,
or we're hoping that's for later?
I think that would be after we talk about STRs.
and
Yeah,
ADUs, because they're all kind of connected.
Okay, yeah,
Venn diagram, if you remember your.
exactly. Does anybody else have thoughts or comments? I
So
should
you
either
see any
supply
value in the existing ordinance, blocking some of the things out? I
It
know.
complicates it, I think, because it was written at a county level, which is a very different entity. The valley is the valley. So we kind of read it, understood it, and then backed up and started from scratch.
Yeah.
Here's what we want.
Well, and it looks good, but it all comes down to what is an agricultural producer.
Right.
The thing was great, but then when you got language in there, it's like, well, if you're an ag producer, it doesn't matter. What is that? That is the biggest thing that we're running into right now is what is an agriculture industry.
So we look to you to tell us.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and I can
That
think
out.
about 1 billion different ways that you're an agriculture producer, which can find 1 million snakes that can say, oh, that's me. So
Right.
that's the hard part we're having with this little valley is you don't want, there's a lot of snakes, we don't want
I mean,
allow that to happen just because we've now given. We don't want that definition to be, the definition needs to be so broad because there's so many different ways to do this at the same time being so broad, then those snakes find that way, be like.
You gotta be able to exclude people. I mean,
But you got a good committee.
yeah, no,
You
we,
got a good committee with, you know, people in the valley, and I think there's some experts with some expertise from outside the valley, so they maybe don't have maybe any of the internal bias that might exist, I don't know.
there's no real vested
Yeah.
interest in it. Just,
Yeah, so to overcome any appearance of partiality, I'm not accusing anybody of the potential for being partial. But that, you know, there's always the concern, okay, well, are we competing?
Yeah.
But we would love it if you guys could come back and, you know, give us a next step
so,
update. And Tyson, was there anything you wanted to say?
I just had a question for Brian, just because this is this is the first time we've had a committee, especially, what do we call them, essentially, a committee appointed by the city council, who reports to the city council. They're doing great work creating a draft for us, but we just haven't had the circumstance where we're up till now, we've been working on ordinances ourselves.
Yeah.
We did
Is there
our best, come
guidance,
tell us.
what I'm trying to say
about it.
is there guidance on how we're supposed to proceed? Should we be waiting for Ian and his team to create that and then we'll refine, or are we supposed to be working in tandem? Have you had any experience with in the past to guide us on that? We're trying to essentially, how can we work in concert and not be stepping on each other's toes?
So, yeah, so the chain of command really goes, you know, the planning commission has to consider any language before it goes to the city council. And so it's great that they have appointed this body to do, you know, hard research and put the numbers, you know, put the time in to create these recommendations. But yeah, I mean, my recommendation is that the ag committee really needs to be working with the planning commission.
and I think that's right.
It's like,
I feel,
Yeah.
I agree, I think that, you know, one of the things that we, as I said, I wish we would have had the experts in ag to give us some input earlier when we were talking about agriculture in our other zones, because we truly were, you know, to me, we were going, shoot, now let's get ready and aim. And that isn't where we wanna be, because it leaves us subject to needing to do a lot more cleanup than we otherwise would have. And so in my estimation, these are our community experts. We are the community representatives that advise the city council. And so they're advising us. I mean, we don't have to take what they give us
Right, we just.
verbatim and say, yeah, this is the way it is. They're giving us their expertise so that we can fine tune our then advisory recommendation to the city council. And I feel like that way we're going to get a much better product that is supported by the community because they've had that input.
Well, the reason we ended up here is really because, and this is something that I had proposed, was to send this conversation as much as anything, white paper level
Yeah.
to city council first, because in a larger city, you have a team. It's not just for Brian. So there's a planning department where a developer or anybody who wants to do anything, including an ag producer, shows up with a proposal. I want to do this. I'm going to build this thing. I want to design this thing. I'm restructuring this part of my property, whatever. And so they work with planning staff initially to tune that up relative to what the ordinances that you already have, which we don't,
We don't have it.
right? So that's the normal city procedure. And so without that, what I proposed was that we as an ag committee would get visibility immediately without waiting for it to come through planning. So anything that comes up that's being proposed on property that's going to affect the neighbors, which is essentially, you know, almost any property. What are you guys up to? Oh, we're building this. And then you want to kind of get a sniff test from the ag committee. Is this going to screw anybody up? around them, if they were to do this, like, nah, that's gonna be fine. I mean, that sounds really cursory, but versus, ooh, we gotta think about that. So that was the idea before I'll use the word developer only because it's what often drives things, but it's anybody who's doing something new on their property, a change agent, let's say. Whatever they're gonna do, there's a tendency for them to invest in the process. So they meet with the planning department and the staff, they do CAD designs, reports, they talk to their accountant, they've got, you know,
And
investment.
LEC is their great idea.
Tens of thousands of dollars of effort and money and time you got into it, it kind of creates a momentum. So then by the time it gets to planning commission, I'm sure you felt this kind of pressure already. It's like, you guys are kind of gonna rubber stamp this, right? It's like, no, it doesn't actually meet what the community and what the regulations say, so no. But the problem with this ag approach is that this exact thing would have happened. Ag is usually in the backseat in the decision process. So planning and planning commission and council would have reviewed all this stuff, and then somebody would speak up from the back of the room. My farm is completely screwed now because you built that thing and I can't get my 14-foot swather down that road anymore. And now I'm gonna have to abandon that field because you put concrete or whatever, right? It's this kind of thing. So that's the heads up that we as a committee were trying to avoid early and then kick it back to you guys. So it's a visibility at the city council level, meaning staff, because that's where planning commission, or sorry, the planning department reports. They don't report to you, right? They report to city staff. So the visibility of the development has to be seen by the ag committee, the planning commission, and the city council, because we are so small, pretty much at the same time.
Yeah.
But we wanted to make sure that we weren't reporting through the food chain of planning commission and then to staff, because that can be too late in the game. The developer, the builder is gonna be way down the road. And like, oh, we've done so much stuff, we're just gonna go ahead with it, and whatever the ag committee says, yeah, well, I see why you feel that way, we're not doing that. And
But
then,
we be more simultaneous in what we're doing?
exactly, that's kind of what I'm saying. So anything we produce really ought to be copied to city council. Don is our representative on the committee as a co-chair. And then we ought to bounce it directly to Brian in planning and planning commission, so that you see what we see. I was like, oh, so you'll have a heads up. As
Well, in
opposed
that
to
way,
what
we're
is-
allowed to we can start thinking about it, because it has to come to us
Correct.
first.
And
It seems like it's much more efficient if we're in from the get-go and know, that way we're educated. So we can move faster to move something forward.
Why do it in sequence when you could do it in parallel? And Brian, is there any legal reason why we can't do that way from an information distribution perspective?
No.
Okay, so we should just do that. I mean,
that's.
So right now, what's the next step? Because that's where, because we do that, we do have a deadline.
Yeah,
so
simplified sexually shorter than I mentioned,
Okay.
so, we have the last chance we have to hear this and move it forward for public comment, I think is on a May 12th meeting, which itself is already a public hearing date, so that's 2 weeks.
you need all the ordinances tuned up from your perspective, having reviewed it and submitted for the public hearing on the 12th. That's the-
So we have a
So
meeting.
you need it by midnight on the 11th.
Well, so we have a meeting next Monday, normally our meetings are Tuesdays, but next week it's odd and we have it on Mondays.
Yeah.
And then the 12th, so any progress, any, you know, as you're going, drafts, anything you want
Okay.
to share. The more chance we have to review it ahead of time, the better we'll be able to address the comment, but the 12th is absolute last.
Could they be meeting with a small committee?
With our
Prior.
community or something?
Yeah, a subcommittee.
Oh, yeah, we will have our own meeting.
But we have a
Potentially
subcommittee of the planning commission that is working, they're looking at the agritourism ordinance, so they can talk, we can't, you know, we have to have the reform requirements,
Number
but.
2 or 3.
But actually, it's Tyson, Angela, and Jim are our small committee. And so they can be involved with you guys
That would be great.
in your
That'd be
top
really helpful.
planning, that would be, you know.
Cause that's just a good way to disseminate the information.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I like that.
Essentially, we need to have a meeting next week to point out the last glaring issue that need to be fixed, so we can have time to fix them, to be able to vote on them
Yeah,
the week after that.
it's a process.
So we'll have to, so you're looking for really proposed ordinances and guidelines.
Yeah, and if you have these three involved, they can help.
Yeah, we can speed that up. So
We-
basically this as a framework.
What,
Just as a notice requirement though, Don't those have to be posted on the 2nd of May?
No, we're not talking about,
We're talking about adding.
we're talking about adding, we've got to add another public hearing.
Okay, so you're not talking about the 12th?
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah, we could fit another public hearing in by the end of the month. We could even, well.
We could even do one
absolutely have
early
to.
June if
We
it,
could do one early in June.
Okay.
That's really
I just wanted to make sure we had it planned.
Another thing to consider, and I know that the city council is gonna ask this question, while these recommendations to completely rewriting the agritourism code are highly desirable, are they necessary? Is there something with the current agritourism code that is broken, that is causing damage, that needs to be fixed?
I think we're.
Or can we move that forward with minimal changes?
You mean
Your break,
fix it
your
with
break
the-
is, you don't have a definition of agricultural.
I think we're hearing, I think what I'm hearing is,
Okay,
yes, we need to start over, and I guess I also don't know. I don't know. If. In my mind, if it's necessary to have agritourism be completed. Before they can lift the moratorium.
Oh, but it's tied to ordinances that we're releasing, it's tied to other times, right?
And also, I mean,
agritourism in the current zoning that has been forwarded to hearing into the city council, so agritourism is a conditionally permitted activity in the AV zone and the FV zone. So I suppose it is not necessary to issue or to remove the moratorium. You simply won't be handing out any agritourism permits.
Building permits, I mean, it would be, yeah, you wouldn't
But
hand
you
out.
told us that we have to approve conditional permits unless we can prove. That they can't
Well,
be mitigated, issues can't be mitigated, but I feel
Yeah.
like we have to have the ordinance. So, I mean, yeah, the current one, maybe it'll make it easier for the council if we basically call it, it's the same framework as our existing, but we can cut and paste and take and
Well, I think,
delete and add to it, it's basis structure is the existing ordinance, would that be easier, so that as you've done in prior updates, you're just simply calling out these are the changes, and it
Yeah,
might
are
be
there-
substantial, but it still changes to that, and that might be easier.
Are there fixes to the current ordinance that could be done quicker than rewriting a brand new one?
Like maybe inserting that definition.
Define what is an agritourism? I mean, as I understand it, agritourism under state law is a secondary activity and must be tied to a primary agricultural use.
And that's how
You
it's
can't,
written out.
so I don't know if somebody could just say a beehive, say they have a beehive and they sell one jar of honey and that makes them
Well, and
I don't know if that applies under state code,
Well,
but
people confuse it with the greenbelt status because the
Yeah, well,
the
for sure,
bar
for
of
sure.
greenbelt is so low
yeah,
that, you cut in the grass on a good piece and
Absolutely.
harvested bale and it's essentially
It's-
greenbelt. I mean, being a little
you can
facetious,
get
but not by.
well, no, but it's
Yeah.
true. The
Yeah.
bar is very low for that. but
Yeah,
it
so this is not that. This is.
That is
a
not
higher
good
bar.
market.
And
Right.
particularly, the housing piece is one of it, but the other one is special events. The slippery slope, what ends up happening is that when there's high tourist pressure, which we have, and high property values, which we have, is that the way you monetize it is to host a wedding every weekend.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not really agritourism, it's on a farm. And I hear what Chris is saying, right? You would like to be able to support, and I think you said the same thing, when you go to places, I want my dollars to go to that producer instead of the Motel 6 or whatever. But what ends up happening is the operator who focuses on special events only will end up absorbing that business from the person who's busy doing farming as their primary activity with some special events. So you have to handicap the person who would have gone special event route and not give them this agritourism benefit.
Right,
There's the trade-off.
just
yeah,
because.
so who's the producer?
Right, so that's
It's
the,
going back to who's the producer.
that's the
and
challenge.
I think that's really gonna be a big challenge that's gotta be addressed, is who is an ag
Focus on
producer?
that. Defining an agriculture producer. And really in clear language.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's our
That's
game.
tricky.
Trying to
Even
avoid pitfalls, right?
even the
No, it's all-
IRS has a hard time differentiating between farm income and non-farm income.
Right. I mean,
Common standards can be, total commercial sales of a product going as low as even just $2,000 a year to qualify. Although profitability does not also profitability does not determine whether or not you were a legitimate agricultural operation. You know, profitability 1 year, the next, you could say profitability 2 out of 7 years, or 3 out of 5 years, or something like that.
Probably not the first day. No, this is way.
But-
You know, one of our conversations with that was when they say me and my wife decide to cut back and not be selling as much and just purely homestead. We're gonna have people that are gonna wanna come and see how we operate a homestead and how we may not be making money on our farm, we may be 100% self-sustainable. Why should we not be allowed to have something there? Because maybe that little rental unit is our only income. But people are staying there because they wanna see how a family of four can be 100% self-sustainable in the land, and we are there still providing agriculture.
So it's not money,
Education.
it's time and energy.
These were the lot of we're running into with these questions, that was one of them as well, and then you just do it with asking this much income, and I was like, what if I'm 100% self-sustainable and trying to teach my practices? Can that be something? Or it was, well, what is your main income? Well, then you have someone like Matt Clark, who runs an excavation company, but runs all the Clark land. How is he not from? Because his main income is excavation.
And yet most of his excavation is on farms, doing farm things for other
Yeah,
farms.
he was actually out tilling his field with
Go
a
ahead.
giant backhoe and using his front end loader to load seed.
Right, because he can. Yeah, no, good.
Kind of, there's a lot of these.
Yeah.
it's-
Well, that seems like it's the $1 million question. That needs to really be thought through.
Yeah.
In this time frame, and we really appreciate you guys. Is there anything else before we kind of wrap up this presentation so we can move on to some of the other items?
Sure, no, I would just say thank you for the platform. I think this is incredibly valuable to the community going forward. Not only to inform your cities, but I think to tell the production community that you are listening, city council is listening, and that the overall community wants this to be successful. So I personally feel incredibly excited and empowered by being part of this process, and it's just been flat out fun. So,
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks all of you for being here. We really
I'm simply proud of
appreciate it. Okay, take care. Hey. Okay, noon, we've got an hour and a half. Does anybody need to stand up and stretch, or you think if we
Good.
keep going? All right. So, do we feel like we can moving on to letter C, do we feel like we can take 3 little eyes off? We heard about tourism. Hey, does anybody have any thoughts on, we can go through these in any order. Start easy, okay. Do we think forest campground is easy? Okay, let's start with forest campgrounds.
The design standards.
It's under design standards.
Yeah, I can share. Yeah, it's not something scheduled, but I can absolutely get him to give you a tour. He does great kid farm camps, but they're not ready to roll those out, I think, for this year. But yeah, they lost their main educator, but
What your subcommittee made.
we can, yeah, subcommittee can certainly
Yeah.
do that. That'll be fantastic.
Back your time.
So I was just curious, just to confirm which zones this applies to, is it primarily FB5 or?
The forest campground zone.
It's at 5 and 4.
F5 and F4, sorry. So just a couple of things, I think it was in here, the WOI standards. For fire pits and things, yeah, it's in there, and
The what standards, sorry?
then, wilderness urban interface design standards, fire regulations, just W. And then there was discussion, I think previously about non-commercial units, so a lot of these are private nonprofit groups that run these. You know, to decide to keep that or articulate that.
Is it currently open for private or not?
What's that?
Is the ordinance currently say it's for private and public, or is it just one or the other? It's both. I don't.
There's a comment here that says commercial campground. It talks about in the definitions, a public campground, a semi-public organization campground, a private campground, and a commercial campground.
Okay, so they're both allowed, it seems like.
Well, this is just the definitions, so I haven't gotten down to say what's allowed and what's not right.
Is Derek rapping, is he on any stuff?
Yes, yeah, Derek's on my team.
Is he moved in a private campground, essentially in section 108-2080. It talks about maximum number of campsites for public and semi-public, and then he struck out what the word for private campground. Which that's 5 to 6, 6 to 7.
Well, I think that's just a confusing, what does that mean exactly? Confusing phrase.
So he struck it out because of Shane Dunleavy's comment going back to July. Shane, you know, Shane's question was he's not sure what it means if a campsite is built in FV3, then there could only be 2 campsites for 3 acres. That doesn't seem very logical.
Yeah.
It's poorly written.
I guess my concern is it cutting out, since it has regulations for public and semi-public, but it doesn't have, he strikes that out for private, there's no regulation for private in that section. That makes sense,
Yeah, we need to have some standard in for private then,
or we just include,
included in the
take away public,
all campgrounds.
yeah. At the very, when it says in a public, commercial, or semi-public organization campgrounds, you could just put,
Let's leave that and say 5.
yeah.
We'll just say 5 campsites per acre.
You guys good with that?
There you go. No, and then it talks about there's a comment about the length of stay, and the comment that is Derek Brad normally one of your people also.
Yeah, that's what we just talked about.
Okay, length of stay. Yeah, I don't think in our mind, we want campgrounds to be places that people just live as snowbirds.
Where is that at?
That would be, would be more the campground that's already over there.
In the document, where are you looking at?
Oh, I'm looking at the comments that talks about, it's a comment on the side, on page 6. Comment says, if it's commercial private property, should the property owner get to determine the maximum length of stay instead of the code? And the comment from Derek Bratton is, the amount of time for transient housing is generally limited for a variety of reasons. The limit is often set by local health departments based on the available on-site facilities. Also, tenant rights law often trigger if it stays longer than 30 days. Formerly designated RV parks and resorts will generally have extended stays rather than campgrounds.
Okay. Yeah, so Aaron has a comment too, but I would say 14. So on section 108-20-61, it says 2 weeks. I think that's pretty standard. It's what's standard in national forests.
I will add that, Derek's from Washington and tenants' rights in Washington are different than they are in Utah. They're, You know, in terms of somebody squatting in a campground and being able to claim residency in Utah is much more difficult than it is in.
But I know like in Middle Fork, you're limited to the number of nights you can camp
Yeah.
in Middle Fork. Because they see a lot of problems if they don't limit that.
But if it's in the lease agreement, the or the rental agreement that the camper signs with the property owner, then that's how it's enforceable. If the property owner is okay with them staying 3 months, they sign a 3-month rental agreement.
But it's not currently set up that way, is it?
I had 2 weeks myself, because I think that for a campground, otherwise you're running an RV park. And that's, I think that's different.
They're just different.
And then adding the minimum 2 ingress egress seems wise for safety.
AG on orange.
That's 7.
That's.
And water source.
Is there anything in here that speaks to water hookups, or does this mean?
Yeah, in section 108 or 2084.
24, because I think that's an issue.
We don't have public ones.
Right, but that would, I think our water companies fit under that definition, so that the water would have to come from a source, so it would either come from whatever the water company is that feeds the property, or if it's a well, that it would have to be an approved well that is, you know, serves for human consumption, that's
I think that's stated fairly well, isn't it though? One source.
hydrant is 1 hydrant for 5 camp units, is that like a fire hydrant or water?
It's frostbite.
So isn't it possible to have dry camping where you have to pack in your own water?
I mean, they only require a hydrant for every 5 units. Or 5
But if
campsites.
if 5 are using, if 5 are using one every hydrant, I mean,
They're not like.
It would be 5 campsites sharing 1 water source.
Like when you go to a campground and there's like the outhouse and then there's.
I think we
place
could
to
pull up, you
Fill up
know?
some water.
just to fill up.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Is there another word for hydrant that might be more clear?
no, and the clarification is fine for me, I guess I was envisioning somebody who's gonna, you know, like you pull in to
Oh,
a campground and you're in a camp and you've got a hookup where you can
Oh,
hook up
hookup.
electricity and water to your travel trailer, to
Right.
running water in your shower.
No, I think hydrant's clear.
no, hydrant is that's what you call the big water spigot.
Yeah, I've got
Handle,
4 of them.
Yeah. it's-
Yeah,
I mean, you could just change it to water source, but no, hookups are very specifically, should be described as hookups.
Okay.
Can't, yeah.
good at that,
They're separate.
thank you.
Is there any reason to ask flush?
There are no questions.
That's what I'm wondering. I
Water
just.
closets or-
Hang on, we're all talking at the same time, and it makes it hard for note takers, things.
What determines a campground? How does that get approved? Where are we kind of?
I think this is it. This is the ordinance that does that, I think. Is that,
Well, it's a permitted use in these 2 zones, correct?
Mhm.
So if somebody has an application, if they're in those zones, they can apply to have this use. But even these are the conditions that they're allowed to go.
Okay, so, but who's the property owner, or who manages, what is that, or?
If it's in there, it'd be at the beginning of the.
That's not there.
whoever the property owner is the person, and if they would have to apply for a permit to have a campground.
Okay, and that's covered in here. What are the,
Well, you can't, I think, you couldn't,
where does it define what is required to have a campground?
In the zoning language,
Yeah,
for the F5 and F40 zone. we
Like
talk
what
about-
designates a campground?
It's what is a campground defined as? I believe that's in our definitions.
Is that what you mean, Jim?
Yeah, it's not a Forest Service control.
No, these would be privately owned or they could be publicly owned by the city, but the city would still need to get permission to build it. The city would still need to prove that its campground meets, complies with the zoning ordinances, so. Or if the county wanted to open a campground, or the state wanted to open a canal out of the state, they get to play by their own rules, but. You know, it could be publicly owned, but it could also just be a private.
So if
have you driven to
So-
Northwood Park?
Yeah.
So when you go by Northwood Park, there are numerous campgrounds
Right.
along the way, they're on private property owned for, some of them are the churches, they have their own campgrounds, or some of them, they're. Like there's a rehabilitation
Sure.
one, so and same as you go up, if you head up 100 southward, Monte Cristo, you go by, well, those are mostly Forest Service, but I think there are some more private, but. So in this, it does talk about, here's forest campground. Means a use or designated, an area used or designated to accommodate 3 or more automobile campers. Travel trailers of not more than 8 feet wide in width. Motor recreational vehicles or tents for use of periodic overnight accommodations. Expressly for temporary outdoor recreational activities. There are 4 categories of forest campgrounds as follows. Public campground, forest campground owned and operated by a public agency. Semi-public organization and campground, forest campground owned and operated by a semi-public nonprofit organization for the exclusive temporary use and enjoyment of its members. A private campground is a forest campground owned and operated by a private organization for the exclusive temporary use and enjoyment of those sharing in the ownership of the campground and or of those holding a purchased membership in the organization. Or a commercial campground, which is a forest campground owned and operated expressly for the purpose of renting space in the campground on a transient basis for profit to the general public. Does that answer your question?
Well, how do you get this approved as a campground? Is there another ordinance or is it in a different ordinance as an option?
I think the other zones say that it's an approved use, and this is the ordinance that says this is what you do if you want to apply to have a campground. This is, I think, isn't that what we're doing?
The building department, the
Yeah.
process, right? Go through.
I mean, so for example, a minimum in this ordinance, a campground has to have a minimum size of 5 acres. It needs to provide water, it needs to provide waste disposal. You know, it has to have adequate fire controls, you know, use the right kind of fire pits and things like that. So those are what are detailed in this document. And the only 2 places, or the only zone that campgrounds are allowed in is the forest F5 or forest F40 zone,
Okay,
which actually begins, you know, kind of just on the east side of town. You drive up towards Causey, you get to the Eagles camp, and that's where F5 starts. And so all of those properties up the canyon are in that F5 zone if they, you know, didn't already have stuff on them that could start a campground or.
And then I think there's some F5 over by the monastery
Yeah.
and that old Stovation Road and Liberty.
okay.
Even up on the hillside in Eden. I think some of that might be.
You can't have more than 5 individual campsites within 1 acre. Clustering, clustering can be allowed, but only as, you still have to separate every 20 campsites with, natural barriers such as heavy timber, valleys, ridges. And then they have to meet the design standards in here, like being able to provide enough parking space. If they're for trailers, they need to have, the correct turning radii.
Yeah, that answers my question, please. Dwayne.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's edits in here that we just talked through that make sense to me. I don't have any additional. Send anything either.
I'm not done.
So you're not done?
Not quite.
It's section 108-2059 talks about signs. Here it says all signs in accordance with the requirements of the zone in which the campground is to be located. Should we just reference the sign ordinance?
Yeah, let's just change that to signs must be compliant with Title I town.
Okay.
So everyone else good?
Yeah.
Alright, I would like to motion to move chapter 108-20 forest campgrounds for public hearing.
A second. Sorry, Zanger seconds.
Lloyd.
We have a motion by Commissioner Lloyd and a second by Commissioner Zanger. And so if there's no additional discussion, I'd like us to take a vote. Have a call. Vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I think that vote was unanimous. All right,
Yeah.
we do. Short-term rentals. This won't necessarily be good.
Is that design standards too?
It is under.
Short, yeah, it is 108-11.
Does the subgroup go over that one? Can I give a overview of what they've changed? Not that you have to read everything, but
Actually, Angela, no, what you,
Let me try.
yeah,
Okay, so there are some things for discussion. We're not all settled on a couple of matters.
Okay.
So the first, as you look at page 1, there's quite a bit of text added that I think addresses more the philosophy surrounding benefits, drawbacks, challenges to short-term rentals.
I know, but I want to point out too that I looked up the definition of purpose and intent. I added it on to the side and at the bottom. Cause I wanted to make sure that I was kind of hitting it. And it does talk about that purpose and intent can do legal, social, and or community goals. So that's what, cause I'm the one that added all the stuff. And I think it meets that, but you guys need to read it and decide.
So, yeah, while you're reading that, I don't oppose any of the language per se, I just personally feel ordinances should be short and sweet to the point and, is it?
Maybe they should be. Maybe,
So, and this might be appropriate when we get into the broader valley-wide discussion to save this and have this as a starting point for discussions. I'm not gonna hang up about this, but that was just my thought to share that I like, I think we can cover these points in a paragraph. And if so, that's always my preference.
Personally, I have no problem with the language that is here. I think it does meet the definition as Terry said. I think it is, I think we do need some of this in the purpose and intent, whether it can be consolidated or not, to something that makes sense. That's okay, I think, I don't have a problem leaving it for now and seeing where it goes.
well, and I took some things out too yesterday. I went back in and cleaned it out. I mean, it is wordy, but I am okay if not every ordinance is short and sweet. And I feel like this one, because of the concern, I don't know. The effect it's having on the community, yeah. That maybe the clarification here right now is okay.
And maybe the next step would be to shorten it if we want to.
Yeah, maybe I wouldn't mind that at all.
This is not a sticking point for me as far as moving on to the rest for me.
Okay, so we can keep rolling and then people can try on that.
And it might be that it goes out for public comment and their comment is.
Yeah.
So
Let's keep going.
Just some things that were stricken that are no longer appropriate. So approval required on bottom of page 2. There was a suggested change, unlawful for an owner to rent any property for a time period of less than, that was 30, then 60, and then 90 was what was
That's what we ended up.
Yeah.
proposed.
Yeah.
Minimum 90-day rentals.
What was the logic behind that?
I guess there's some tricks people can pull with short-term contracts and then, but then they don't, they let them expire, but then they rent
So-
again.
So what happened?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I mean,
I was trying to restate what you said.
A rental contract is written, and then there's a clause in the rental agreement that says no penalty for finalizing early for canceling the contract.
Okay.
Right, and so then, so they stay a weekend and then they go, oh, well, we think we'd really like to cancel the contract. The other piece is that they will do something like back to back. But with one rental, but numerous people coming in under kind of the same contract, they're just various ways, right? We get to these places because different people find ways to manipulate things.
Yeah.
The other suggestion, I got a good suggestion on how, one way to manage the time period. If we were to shorten it, if they cancel the contract early, the people can leave, but they're still obligated to pay their taxes to the city for the entire amount of time. I think.
But if they're all flying under the radar, they're not really visible to the tax entity anyway, probably likely.
Well, they have to have a license and they have to be, like, they would. I mean, I think that's an enforcement issue that would have to be
Right.
fleshed out, but I think enforcement is critical, but. Also that, what we really need in our valley is housing for people. Workers residents,
Mhm.
you know, so. Short-term rentals take away our housing options for people who work up here and wanna live up here because so they don't have to drive so far to get to work. Having reasonable, affordable rentals for young families, for elderly folks. And it takes, when when an investor can just purchase those short-term rentals and shorter term, I think 30 days doesn't really meet helping us with longer term rental stability for housing. And so,
Does that make sense to you?
Your thought process makes sense to me, I just think it's too cumbersome personally on landowners to telling, like property owners to telling them how they can or can't manage their property.
Then can I ask you how changing the contract period minimum to 90 days, how does that discourage people from entering these no cancellation fee or no cancellation penalty contracts?
the penalties become greater if they have to pay the what they owe to the city as far as this is their income is expected, but they have to pay that anyway. If they let it cancel, they have to pay that.
I'm not sure,
But I don't know that we can.
I'm not sure you can tax them on the value of the contract. I think you can only tax them on what they bring in.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's a tax issue that we.
You can tax them on the income they report, which is the payment that they receive. You can't tax them on the income that they were promised to receive.
Okay,
Okay,
so maybe just bump it back to 30? And because I feel like the enforcement,
I mean, we are
Part of
talking
this-
about, this is a short-term rental, so.
yeah,
Okay,
and we attack it through,
Whoever did ask that, this is.
oh, I don't know who
Check
did
it,
it, let me
maybe.
see if I did it. No, that was you.
Okay, so that was that one, somebody can go ahead and fix that, I'm gonna scroll through.
Well, you did the 90 days, Angela, you had to do that one. Oh, I can do it, I can,
So, but
okay.
this is, I mean, this is approval required. Otherwise, it's unlawful to rent, you know, this is a otherwise. This is if it's not a short-term rental, you can't rent for less than so much time. Happen if we go with 60 days. I feel like even a 30-day rental keeps that, you know, one of our major goals is to provide residential housing. And nobody wants to move every 60 days or every 30 days. We want housing available for people who want to live here, not investment housing. And so unless it's a short-term rental, they need to have that available for rental for a longer period of time.
Okay, but Brian, why is this even in short-term rental if it's not dealing specifically with short-term rental? It's dealing with somebody. We're telling them it's unlawful to rent their property for a time period of less than 30 days.
Unless it's a short term rental.
Unless it's a short-term rental. Yeah,
Maybe it's just a definition of what is a short term rental.
Maybe, yeah.
yeah, I just think it's unclear, maybe that needs to be tightened up.
Should name the definition, if it doesn't.
Yeah, maybe we need a definition of
So
what is a short-term rental, and
definition.
what's the length of a short-term rental?
By definition, in most communities and in Weber County and in our adopted definitions, a short-term rental is any rental for less than 30 days.
Less than what?
30 days.
Okay. So then I think,
So governing anything outside of that is kind of out of the scope in my mind.
Yeah,
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 agreed.
okay,
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah, we've made it.
Yeah. I think we were all misreading it maybe.
So the approval required is just a statement.
Yeah, it's in the definitions already, so.
Do we want the definition in here as a part of the, or do we think that's okay?
I just think that's poorly written,
Which part?
that what we're talking about, the approval required.
Or maybe, but it should be stated something that if. If this meets the definition of short-term rental, less than 30 days, then approval.
I think that was the county's intent, was the statement.
Like, when does it apply?
It only applies if they are seeking a permit to act as a short-term rental, otherwise they're not allowed to rent for less than 30 days.
Okay, well, it's very murky.
Well, this, that when it applies, I guess.
Okay.
Let's see, next. We're down on page 4.
Okay, so Angela, you maybe need to explain what you wanted to do with the wet water thing.
Well, I just think consistency of where we've used these terms elsewhere in the code, because I know we've sort of been piecemeal pushing things through the city, and I just want the verbiage to be the same when we're referring to proof of water. So, ordinance, we got it right on, but if we could copy that over.
Well,
Middle.
I would say that
Is it already inherent in any building?
this is already required for a building permit,
Okay.
and so.
So we don't.
What was that? What was that? The one line?
Proof of water, proof of sewer service, those are required at the time the structure is constructed. You don't need to go back and say, prove that you have water. Well, I turned the tap on because I already have a hookup, because that was permitted when the building was.
I think it was modified because there was already a clause in here about insert letters. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
strike the original language or keep the original language, after which.
I'm looking at that at the building on proof for residential occupancy. It says short-term rentals not allowed in any building unless it has received approval for residential use and has a certificate of occupancy. So I agree with that, but I also think that it is important that as a part of the licensing process, we need to have some inspections to make sure, because if the building is old and it has a certificate of occupancy, as I think I said when we started talking about this a little last time, I've had numerous people call me now, and tell me about places that they know are being used as short-term rentals, and they are telling me they're not safe. The
All right,
the water is brown coming out of the faucet, I mean, because of bad pipes, or the deck is wobbly and not safe to walk on, or what have you. I think part of this, we need, in licensing, we need some sort of an inspection, to take place when the building is gonna be habited by human beings. And we need some sort of an interval where that is re-inspected. I don't know what the interval is going to be for renewing your license, if that's a year or 2 years or whatever, but I think an inspection makes sense at those intervals to make sure that people are staying in safe places. I've stayed in
There
short-term
is an
rental settings.
inspection, there is an inspection.
Yeah, yes.
in this
Okay,
but aren't we still talking about application procedures?
We were, yes.
And I think the original clause about water, I think maybe is worth keeping because it talks about specifying the maximum occupancy. Of sleeping room, so maybe there's that connection as a part of the
Okay,
discussion.
yeah, so we just take it out. No,
Well, leave it.
no, leave it in.
No, I know, but oh, you already did, okay.
So, I have liberty. Okay, then just adding address, phone number, email, of property owner versus just the name. Seems like a good way to get in touch with people. That's all pretty straightforward, I think. The last paragraph on page 4, signed and add note and notarized acknowledgement by the owner. And I think we should keep responsible agent. I think
Okay,
responsible agent covers.
Responsible agent is defined as a
Okay.
management company.
The owner, does it also include the owner?
The owner can be the responsible
Yeah.
agent if they, but the responsible agent is defined as somebody that can respond to a nuisance complaint or safety issue on the property within 60 units.
Okay, so if we, and this is something we talked about when we met the other day.
Mhm.
There were some places where it said owner and or
no, I took it all out.
responsible agent, and we took it out. But should we leave owner and responsible or responsible agent?
Yes, I would leave the responsible agent in there because the
Legal.
owner, I know that, the owner may be out of state.
Right, but
But
when
we
we
want-
took out owner, we assumed that the owner could be either, the owner could be responsible agent. If we had responsible agent, that included the owner if the owner didn't have a management company.
Yeah.
So
that's-
I'm asking for your guidance, should we say owner or?
I would say
Owner
owner
and
and
or?
or, yes.
Okay,
Mm,
yeah, cause we thought we were gonna do a good thing by consolidating and it sounds like we should not. So,
We need to mention, so this last paragraph, sorry, getting the weeds here, but it says management. So that should be replaced with responsible agents.
Yeah,
right, the owner and
And
or
or,
responsible agent.
yeah, and responsible, I guess, is capitalized. It's very consistently,
In clause 7, we require that the owner appoint a responsible agent. They can appoint themselves,
There, that's why we took out owner.
but
That's fine, we'll keep it.
Yeah, we'll put it in, it's fine.
Okay, yes. Planning division on page 6, planning division shall designate an inspector at the applicant's expense.
yeah, we would just have our city building inspector or code
And-
enforcement officer conduct the inspection.
Any health, safety, welfare issues during inspection shall be resolved, and there's a question of what time frame should we insert here, or should?
well, it says at the, let's see, should the property fail the inspection, the owner shall have 60 days to bring their property into compliance.
The paragraph above for the initial property?
Oh, that's.
Oh. Okay,
I think they just can't, I think the time is up to them, they just can't get their license and use it
Yeah.
until they get it done.
yeah,
Let's take that up. All right, then here's where we have, the owner shall have, it was 90 and it was changed to 60 days to bring their property into compliance, so the license will be revoked.
I think 3 months is a long time, and it's not.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say.
I would recommend keeping the license suspended and not revoked. Because that way, you're giving them a good faith opportunity to correct the issue within that time period, and then you can unsuspend them and let them get back to their activity. And
But then
without
how long
having-
does it hang suspended?
Until they fix it.
It's not active, so it's kind of indefinite, right?
They're.
So they can't use it, they can't.
So they
rent
can't
it.
use it legally, but then they don't have to go through an entire reapplication process and pay a new application fee and have a new, I mean, they're gonna have to get an inspection just to get the suspension released. But,
Right, so responsible.
What if it's 2 years? Or I guess, what if, would that expire, if their license expires during that time, then they should have to reapply. It shouldn't stay in the
Yes.
suspended status if they exceed the amount of time that their license is good for.
Yes, and
Do we need to
that's
clarify
further
that?
down in the bottom
Got
where it talks about what happens when the license is suspended or
Okay.
revoked.
Thanks.
There was some language added at, on page 7. Your responsible agent, a lot of local stuff added here, local designee, local licensed insured, incorporated property manager. Local refers to any entity located within the city limits or 30-mile radius of the city.
Just throw that out there. A lot of the comments from people was that they wanted more local management. Rather than a big management thing that was not, maybe they have hopefully they would have a local rep. But they would prefer that the management stay as close to the properties as possible. Is that unreasonable?
I don't know that the
Good question.
company has to
I don't know
be
if 30
there.
minutes is less reasonable than 60.
I don't know that,
It would basically, 30 minutes would be someone within the valley or maybe Ogden.
Yeah.
And any further away than that. would
or
be-
Mount Green.
Or Mount Green? Yeah.
Maybe Mount Green. I think that would be there, like, it could be a representative, like, what if there's a management company, it might be bigger, but maybe they hire somebody who
Right.
lives closer, right? I don't know that the company has to be based.
No, and I don't think the comments said that either. They
Right,
just wanted to have somebody closer
Who can respond.
who can respond in a timely manner. I don't know. So is it too presumptuous to put in a 30-mile radius of the city? Is that gonna just legally get shut down or?
Well, no, I'm sure it'll be disputed. But, well, I'm not sure.
Well, didn't we say they had to be able to respond?
Yeah,
They have to be able to respond in person if needed within 30 minutes of receiving notification of the complaint. They aren't gonna be able to do that if they aren't within a 30-mile radius.
So does it go without saying, if we just left the time frame in?
then we don't need to.
Then we don't have to be
specify.
redundant.
You could go in a helicopter.
They could.
I don't care if they get it, right?
I mean, that's possible.
Yeah. But can they land? We don't have that word.
What do we wanna do about these comments?
I would not go below 30 minutes.
No,
That's reasonable.
No,
If you wanna keep it 30, I'll see mine.
So what do we gonna do about these local this area? Do you wanna keep this in there?
well, I don't know. I kind of want to hear what you guys are thinking. If it's too
I
like
just don't know how we would
picky
enforce
picky
it.
or.
We really are gonna go after enforcing that. If that's a meaningful piece to add.
personally, I think if they can respond within 30 minutes.
Cause they might hire somebody, they might be located outside, but have a local.
Yeah, I mean, I know somebody who does property.
Well, I know, I understand that. I think, yeah, we could probably take it out. I think we could take it out.
I know somebody who does property management up here in the valley. That person lives in
And let the
North Ogden.
time, yeah, let the time,
They live in North Ogden.
Determine.
I mean, at least,
are you doing it, Angela? Are you want me to go in? Are you doing something like that?
I'm not doing it right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, for example, if you're a renter for an Airbnb, the industry standard is that if you have a problem and you text your contact, you should get a response in less than 10 minutes.
Okay, so 30 is not too bad.
So I think
Okay. You want me to do it?
I thought I did.
No, not all of it. Maybe the number or.
Alright.
Um.
Oh, did you get it, Angela?
Yeah, she did.
We've got lots of things floating around there.
Yeah, she just took it. She
Okay.
took it right here. Are we moving? So we struck the language. There was a lot of discussion about minor violations and major violations and needing to define what constitutes what. And we just eliminated the difference and said, here's a violation. And then we we created that you'll see further down, what happens if there's a violation. So, so that's why you see major violation line now as we move down.
What page are you on?
I'm on 7, where are you guys? I just,
Okay, now I am.
cause we were talking about the agents.
Okay.
For example, we have the notification of an agent change. That I think it constituted a major violation if you didn't. You didn't tell what that was, and so we said it's violation.
And it might make more sense as we go down to
Yeah,
violation.
so here next, I think, I'm looking at the operating standards, and this is what we use to base the violations on. So the operating standards. And these were from the original ordinance, internal posting, and, contact information for the owner and the responsible agent. Including a phone number for 24-hour response to emergencies, property maximum occupancy, the information about parking. Map and description of fire extinguishers. Applicable requirements for noise, etc. Fire restriction information, and any other information deemed necessary by reviewing agencies to ensure health and safety. Street addressing, advertising requirements. The short-term rental license number,
That's for
I-
advertising.
what?
That's an advertising requirement.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it would, yes. Maximum occupancy permitted. Parking, again, maximum parking. A link to the city's short-term rental regulations in case the renter wants to look at the regulations. And this was in the original ordinance, we just changed to Ogden Valley City. But it says the following language shall be included verbatim in a prominent location, any advertisement or short-term rental property in Ogden Valley City that does not provide a unique license number is unlikely to be a lawfully licensed short-term rental. That was required in the previous ordinance, we just
Yeah.
updated it to say city. Then we did, occupancy limits. We looked at a lot of the comments. And I think we tried to consolidate the language so it was more easy to understand. And so we said maximum occupancy, no more than 2 people per bedroom, plus 4 people. If they have if they want to put some bunk beds in, or if they wanna have somebody sleeping on a couch. For a maximum of 10 people per short-term rental, so no more than 10. That
That was in there prior.
was all in there prior, yeah,
Yeah.
that was all in there prior.
Yeah.
We shortened a little bit.
The 2 paragraphs that are crossed out, we all agreed that they didn't need to be there.
Moving on down, we didn't make any changes to a lot of things.
Yeah.
We took out the exception for the DRR zone because we don't have that anymore. We addressed with a little more strength based on public comment of parking up and down the streets, that the vehicles have to be within the property boundary lines and in accordance with the parking plan, so not on all over the front lawn.
Yeah.
No vehicles with passenger capacity of greater than 8. Those great big vans. The rest is I'm gonna scroll down until there's something new. Outdoor lighting, we inserted the lighting ordinance and changed it to Ogden Valley City. And we inserted the Oh, Louis is one, I think Louis, I think of
Another way.
colleges, so Louis is a college thing. Anyway, but, we just inserted the link and it was actually down lower, it was already in, or did you add it both places?
No, I added it with fire pits before I saw it.
Yeah, but I think it's fine there. Moving on down,
So page 12,
I'm on page 12, complaints and violations.
no, talked about the owner responsibility.
Okay, owner responsibility, ensure that the owner's responsible, it's the owner's responsibility. Is to ensure that their responsible agent performs their responsibilities according to the section, so owner is ultimately responsible.
And we inserted it in there because then it gives us access to using that as a violation. If it wasn't in there. And the responsible agent wasn't responding accordingly,
And that's why
we would have no teeth. To use that as a violation. So we have
because
to
it's
put it in there.
it's part of the operating.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
Well, you can only
Why is it violation?
penalize. Or, exact a fee if somebody isn't following everything within this section.
Well, and because we left it that way, right?
Yeah.
That's the way they discriminated violations in the original ordinance, and so we just reworked things. To get rid of the whole major minor issue, that one seemed, it was hard to define, and two, incredibly hard, and I think to administrate.
Yeah.
To administer, okay, well, we have to have a category of minor and major, and how many of these, so we get rid of those, and what's the timeline? That's an administrative nightmare, and it's expensive to try to administer like that, so we rewrote for complaints and violations. We did make some changes there.
It just provides us some teeth.
Yeah,
So on the complaints and violations, where it says making an initial complaint. We've got phone or text, but I'm wondering if we should just keep our phone.
Yeah, text.
Well, the city will provide a contact information.
I think
It has
it
to be.
says phone or text, I mean, not many people use landline phones anymore, but there may be, and you don't want a telephone that's going to go to a voicemail and not be responded to.
If I could add,
Yeah,
putting in the method of contact specifically in the code like this is troublesome because it legally binds the city to providing a certain type of response. If we just put in, for example, the language that Weber County had was a means established by the planning division, which gives the division flexibility so that when they are applying and permits are being issued, the division can just set a policy to say, okay, you are going to contact Jill here at this number, or you're going to use this email address, or you're going to,
Yeah,
Okay,
but this is for somebody to make a complaint.
yes, but if it's still, that's correct. So
Might be a-
licensing isn't an issue, but again, you're tying the city to one particular technology that may or may not be available at a given time.
yeah, so I hear that, and how do we rectify the immediacy of the need? Because we've said they have to respond within 30 minutes, so how, I mean, you'll come up with a way to make sure that there's somebody who will get that complaint and reach out to the person who needs to respond, so they can respond within 30-minute timeline?
Well, we're not committing the city to respond within 30 minutes. The responsible agent has to respond within 30 minutes.
But who's going to notify the responsible agent?
Yeah, that's the problem.
It's the property owner's responsibility, and when you rent an Airbnb, you get a name and a phone number that says, if you have problems, contact this person. That's the responsible agent.
Okay, then I think we need to
The
talk.
public does not call the responsible agent and say, hey, your STR is causing a problem. The public contacts the city.
That's where we're at.
And that's,
How do they contact the city?
so they need to contact the
We can
city.
put that information out on the website.
Yes,
We don't have to put it in the code.
okay, I'm
Okay,
following you, but the next step for me, Brian, is when they do that, you will ensure that that person that somebody is going to be able to respond to this 24/7.
No,
Well, then it doesn't work.
Then it won't
Because
work.
how is
we're
somebody?
not going to commit the city to 24/7 response. If it's a health and safety issue, they can call the police or the fire department.
How do we, then if we go back, how do we enforce,
Yeah,
how do we possibly enforce
This
this
just made
requirement
enforcement move.
for 30
It
minutes?
doesn't make enforcement moot, it just puts it within regular business hours. We're not going to have the city responding at 2 o'clock in the morning. We're gonna have the sheriff's department responding at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Okay,
Because that's a nuisance, that's a clear nuisance or safety hazard. We're not gonna have the city respond because somebody calls up at 2 in the morning and says they left their garbage can out on the curb. And they're not allowed to.
but that's not why they're gonna be calling.
Yes, it is why they will be
not how-
calling.
It's
Anytime you provide 24/7 response,
But,
people are gonna be calling 24/7 and they're gonna call for all kinds of things.
okay, so let's go back to what we talked about before, which was the responsible agent must respond within 30 minutes.
Correct.
Okay, so if they're not available, if the problem occurs at midnight on Saturday and
Just
it's
do the
not
problem.
that, okay, choose the problem. Not trash cans, because trash cans.
Noise. Noise.
Noise,
Dogs barking,
not,
people in a party.
yeah, a party, and it's happening on the weekend. If we're telling the person that their complaint goes to the city and the city is gonna wait until the next business day and to work through their list of people, then they nobody's gonna respond within 30 minutes. So do we need to go back up and say, or complain, call the sheriff? I mean, do we need to include, call law
I
enforcement?
think it's the responsible agent's duty to respond, and there'll be a record of that. They'll say, I called so-and-so at this date. Yeah, it might not be resolved by the planners. In the
But it might be
middle of the
resolved
night,
by the
but
police.
there'll be a record of, did they violate this because they didn't solve the problem in time in which.
But they aren't going to know, so they can't.
Yeah.
The gap for me,
The facts, right?
they're gonna know after the fact, and that doesn't fix your problem, right? That doesn't fix your problem if you need the response. Maybe what we need to have is call law enforcement. As a piece of this, we need to include, you need to call law enforcement, because what this looks like to me is if you want to report a violation, you report it to the city, and then it works its way through the process. And once the person at the city then is the only person that can contact the responsible agent, and then and that could be 3 days or 4 days if it's a long weekend, if they get to it. So I'm seeing a disconnect. If you're the neighbor and the thing is happening and you can't sleep because there's a huge swimming pool party and kids are up and they're
Right.
they're loud and they're swearing and the lights are on and
But you're
they're,
gonna call the police.
so then I think what
But
we're talking about-
here's the disconnect. You call the police. How is the city to know that the police were called? Somehow, I mean, you can't impose on the police that they have to report to the city a violation of a short-term rental.
right,
So that's where the disconnect is. How do we track that midnight call to an appropriate agency, but it doesn't provide any accountability for the owner, between the owner and the city,
and
and being able to find them.
And we did have, we required in the posting that the required elements. And when I stay at Airbnbs or VRBOs, and when I stay, I get a piece of paper that says, if you have any problem, here's the contact person.
Yeah, I do
I mean,
too.
I think we should also say, why is it there? We have it on the information that has to be posted in the rental for somebody, I think the person that's there ought to be able to call that responsible agent, and because they're supposed to be able to respond within 30 minutes, and we're taking out the necessity of the bureaucracy to get there. And by doing that, if there's a piece in here that talks about safety and that we don't expect responsible agents to put themselves in jeopardy, in harm's way, so they can call for sheriff backup if they need it. But if we have this huge bureaucracy, I mean, people are behaving badly now. And if that party goes on and on and on, and people are drinking and they get into an escalation, that's how people get hurt. The neighbor comes over to complain and the guy says, go to hell, and shoots them. I mean, it's happening, and we don't want it happening in Ogden Valley, but it happens everywhere. And we have had drive-by shootings at the STRs in the Ogden Valley, and that, you know, and when you call the sheriff, unfortunately, the sheriff's capacity and the way they triage things is, well, we'll get there when we get there, and it might be next Tuesday because we're in Ogden and they're a bigger
Okay,
hotspot.
Lisa. That, we all agree with that, but we still have to figure out a way the complaints can be handled in a way that there's notification to the city of a violation.
Can't the person just?
May I
Call-
answer that for you?
Yeah.
Please.
I get a report every day.
Oh,
Of all the
Okay.
calls up.
Okay, no.
So like,
Yeah.
I get a police report every day.
so,
So I think all the council people do, but if we could, that seems to be a city internal mechanism that we could connect. As we do short-term rentals, but they do let us know all the calls they answer, every one of them.
So they're letting you know through like a print form, they're not calling you. Okay, you're getting a report from them, but then, so that would require you or staff to identify if any of those complaints belong to a short-term rental.
okay.
And then you would pass it on.
I think we can figure that out.
So
I think
separate. So I have
the
a
sheriff's department can be given access to that information.
Sure,
So if they are responding in real time to a complaint, they can notify
I think,
the city, but it is not common practice. Or the sheriff's department can notify the responsible agent. It is not I can
I
just
don't
tell you,
want, I don't want to do
I
that.
don't know a single city in the state that has on-call staff that are not law enforcement that respond to
Okay.
issues like this.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, well, can I just,
Sure.
when my brain
Yeah,
is thinking about this, is that your concerns about reaction time are separate from the violation piece in my mind, right?
A little
So
bit,
you're
yeah.
wanting things resolved, and that's calling the responsible agent, calling the sheriff,
Right.
that's not city staff. The violation piece comes after the fact, when all the dust is settled, when they get notified by the police, it's not an immediate reaction.
Right, but we didn't know they got notified by the.
So I think the violation piece
Yeah,
is
But-
separate for
They
the
are.
city, they don't need to be notified immediately, they'll be notified in due time, but it doesn't need to be
and the violation can be taken care of
but we
after
do
the
have,
fact, yes.
but going back to section 11-9 complaints. Here are the minimum requirements for complaint resolution, making an initial complaint. The initial complaint is made to the city designee by process,
That was just in there,
and
that
then-
was already in there from neighbor counties.
right, and that's okay, right, but
But
that
maybe,
doesn't solve the immediacy of the issue. If they have to make that complaint only to only
Okay.
to the process, wait, just let me finish my thought.
okay,
If they have to make that complaint to the city by that process and they will follow up, that's fine. But the immediacy of the issue is what is the public concern of, hey, so maybe we need to say, call the sheriff. You know, if you need to call the sheriff, needs to be your first line of defense.
right,
Call the sheriff. Now, honestly, I would not be opposed to saying, I mean, you could have all that information via a grammar request. I believe someone could make a grammar request and have a list of all the short-term rentals and all of their agents. I believe you could have that as a grammar request. So if it's available, why wouldn't it be available to the public? Why wouldn't we put that on the city's website and someone could say, is this, hey, there's this party 2 doors down? Is this their kids who are having a big party because the parents are out of town, or is this a short-term rental? And if it's a short-term rental, here, then I wanna make a complaint to the city, but you can also contact the responsible agent so that they can respond.
There's a lot of decisions and all that.
Right, no, for sure, but I think the immediacy of, I believe that is all public information that would be accessible under a grant request or a FOIA request.
Brian, what do you think?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if that would be available.
Make a note of them, maybe.
Yeah.
We can ask Corbin, but
Can't the complainant just report it to the police and also the next morning send an email or text or whatever?
So we do require, and the county does require the responsible agent be available to respond within that requirement is 60 minutes, but you want to change it to 30, but I will follow up with Weber County and see how they handle that 60-minute response time.
Well, they did.
they
based
don't
on
get notified for 4 days.
Well, that's not true. We don't know that.
Okay.
What if I'm, for example, while this discussion has been going on, I've been looking around on the internet. Some communities, now these are also communities that maintain their own police departments, but the examples I'm finding are the police departments keep a record of where the licensed short-term rentals are, and when they have a incident recorded at one of those locations, the police department immediately notifies the responsible agent. And so that the responsible agent now has their 24/7 contact, and they now have 60 minutes to respond.
So if our contract with the sheriff's department could have that element in it, that I think could help rectify that, and they could call the responsible agent, I think that could be a fix for that concern. But I'm responding to, Terry did an incredible amount of research through all the comments made on this ordinance, and the overarching message from the community was, we don't, what is gonna happen right now? We have to tolerate this too long, nobody responds, it's an enforcement issue, and if it happens on Friday night after business hours, that's.
Okay, but I think if I'm hearing you right, I think there's more than one complaint. Some of them need to be rectified quickly, noise.
Yeah.
Or maybe something's off, and it would make sense that the police would intervene.
Right.
But somebody also might be complaining about the parking, the garbage cans, I don't know what it would be, but there's the problems that the complaints that require immediate action can be handled by the police. And the communication would allow the city to provide a fine. The other things, they can go to the city.
Yeah.
Via email or the city website. I don't know what it would be. And then they would be handled and fined accordingly. They don't need to be taken care of right that in a second. Sure. I do like the idea though of having access to licensed short-term rentals and contact information.
If this helps you, we also have a code enforcement person that we're hiring who will look at all those issues. So for short-term rentals, and our problem was enforcement.
Yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
So the code seemed to work well. The problem that I heard so much was enforcement was the problem. So we do have, we're trying to get a contract signed, and we do have a person that will do code enforcement for us.
Okay.
And I do really, really like your suggestion, Ryan, of having the sheriff's department have access. I think that really, that helps me with, okay, the call comes into dispatch, and dispatch can figure this out, maybe dispatch can figure it out and go, oh, yep, tell the officer and or whoever, they figure out that process and they can make that call. And then we've got that notice done. That, to me, that fixes it, because it might be parking, but it might be parking in front of the driveway and I can't get out and I'm a physician on call.
Right. But the other thing too is that, my mind just went blank. The numbers, the enforcement agent could be responsible for making sure that that list was updated
Oh, yeah.
to the sheriff's department and.
So I see those as outside of the purview of
I do.
planning right now.
That will take care of it with the
Right.
permitting process.
Right.
When the city issues a short-term rental license, that information will be provided to law enforcement.
Well, then that,
Okay.
making an initial complaint, that needs to be reworked.
Well, I think the original language, other than county to city,
Okay.
is what works according to
Okay,
staff. So if we could,
okay, let's see if we can,
So question,
Do we need an addition here though, that they can call, they can also call the sheriff's department if
but the public isn't seeing this.
no, they're not.
They're,
And a complaint is a complaint. It encompasses all of them, not just an immediate.
Jim, what was your question?
so you're not gonna call the sheriff if there's trash cans blocking the driveway, or
No,
let's say a pipe bursts in the unit.
well, that's different, that's the person who's using the unit.
Yes, but they're not gonna call the
Oh,
sheriff.
no,
They're gonna call the property owner or the management, whatever.
I think we're talking about, this is talking about the complaint from the neighbor. Oh.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just a reminder, it's one from.
Oh my goodness, okay. Well, let's go ahead and finish up the day talking about this, because there's no time to work on another one, we might as well.
well, the rest of them, we didn't,
So
I mean,
most of it is really just your changes to the types of violations.
Yes, and that's a lot.
I wasn't there for this.
Right, you had to go.
we tucked into it after
You
that.
wanna, Kara, do you wanna walk through the way we reworked violations?
So what we did is we removed designation between a minor violation and a major violation. We just have violation, period. So you're gonna see a lot of blanked out stuff. And we'll start on the top of page 13, where it says violations. Violations shall be any violation within a 12-month period of the short-term rental operational standards as provided in this section. Violations for unlicensed rental property shall be classified as unlicensed violations, so handled separately. And then violations shall be subject to an administrative penalty as provided below. Well, keep going down. Unlicensed, same thing, they'll be handled separately. So then we get down to the administrative penalty on the top, on page 14. And it's totally up for discussion. First violation receives a warning. Second violation is $500 fine or the full amount of the rental agreement in place during the violation, whichever is greater. Third violation doubles. Fourth violation doubles.
Doubles the third.
Yeah. Fifth violation, license will be revoked and not available to reapply for 3 years. Is it too much? Not enough?
I think it's the turn. And 5 violations is a lot.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's a lot, if you're pushing that in, and I think part of what we were also we were trying to make it something that could be administered. Because it felt like if you had to count how many minor violations and now it's gonna be a major violation and you had to discern, well, is this a minor violation or a major violation? And it was mixed all through and it's like, a violation is a violation.
Yeah.
And
It's not that if you violated parking, that was more major than violating something else. They're just all violations.
They're
I don't know that they need to be weighted in any way.
because then we have to start defining and listing all the
Yeah.
things that might be minor or major.
Well,
Are they not defined?
No, they weren't defined.
they're not weighted. Like one is, no, the way that a major violation was reached was an accumulation of minor violations.
I see, so you've already just kind of dealt with that as one.
Right.
Yeah, we just said, instead of having to keep track, was this their
Three within
second
30
minor
time
or their
period,
third minor? If
60
it's their
days.
second minor, then they're okay, but if it's their third minor, then it's a major.
In 4 months.
And then it just was very, very complicated.
Yeah.
I like that you pulled out on license separate, I think, to me, that would be the major violation. But
That's a whole different,
Yeah.
yeah.
But they still have to be handled differently, I think. And then we
And
added just in failure to pay citation fines in full to Ogden Valley City within 10 business days of receiving notice of citation will result in a late penalty of $250 per day.
What did we talk about the suspension? What was the condition when we said instead of revoke or suspending, wasn't that?
We still did suspension. I thought we went back in and suspended.
Right, but what, for what?
That was if they didn't pass, if they're not having the inspection.
That was for the
That's the same kind of inspection, that's our violation.
That was different.
So I think, yeah, maybe we need to, instead of fines at some point, suspend, you know, if they're not fixing it, then they can't continue.
Some of the fines days.
I feel good about
Revoke.
revoking.
We did, at the 5th violation,
I think if you haven't figured it out by the 5th violation,
yeah.
maybe you shouldn't have a short-term rental
Well,
license.
and so what, and the reason that's important is because if you go up to complaints and violations, the things that are violations are when you go back to,
Well,
I
like,
think that 5 times the pot.
it is a lot. but
well, then we
that-
could say 4th violations, license will be revoked.
Brian, can you actually revoke an STR license in the place that has it on its deeded, whatever, development plan or on its deed? Can you still?
They,
that way?
so all the deed or subdivision agreement does is give them the right to the use. But the use still requires a license to be
And they have to.
accomplished legally, so yeah, you can revoke the license. And you can penalize the leaf on.
And what about this notion of, like, so some random person wants to place on Airbnb, they get a $1,500 fine and they refuse to pay it. Is it common for cities to incur those, to impose those types of fines? And then what would be the process? I mean, is the city gonna get wrapped up in like court content, giving people to?
Fines like that are not uncommon.
Okay.
But yeah, you may struggle in some cases to collect.
But the other thing too is non-collection, you can lien a property for
Exactly,
non-collection.
yeah, or
And that's
you
a
know,
threat.
there are civil remedies like putting a lien on them, or if it's egregious enough, then it can become a criminal violation.
So maybe that needs to be added under in here too, an unpaid violation after 4th. It becomes a lien or.
Well, we do say-
Or next meeting.
We
Oh,
certainly can, but we did already talk about some of these penalties with Corbin. And he said, oh yeah, you can.
Okay.
We could, yeah, but these were all reasonable.
And you got someone to enforce all this.
We're in the process of hiring a code enforcement officer, if this is an ordinance that we're to enforce it, as I understand.
Angela, on page 15, it says, any short-term rental properties licensed or licensed in violation of unpaid fees will be subject to a property lien.
And so, yeah.
Well,
I don't know what those numbers really mean off the top, but
What numbers?
well, yeah, how those add up and, you know, if it's really. Gonna be a deterrent or, you know, with a property that's rented to 45 people for $500.
Well,
So.
one thing, and we had the same conversation, right? It already says no more than 10. It's part of the ordinance.
So that's a violation.
So if they have 45 people in there, that's a violation, and. It depends on, so the fine is tied to the amount that they are charging. So if it's a big property and they're charging we said $500 at a minimum, or the rental, whatever their rental agreement is, so if they rented it for 3 days at $1,000 a night, it's whichever is more.
Their fee is
So-
3,000 is to the public. What do you think?
Well, I don't think we're quite ready to do that yet. I think we need to finish it up.
What else?
Do you think we're, I mean.
Well,
I
because
feel like
we
we're
need to
ready,
say,
or do we-
Do you want
Move
a fifth
forward?
violation? Do you want it to be stop at a fourth violation? I mean, and I didn't finish it out for unlicensed violations. I just said, how long do you go?
Yeah, I would say. If we're gonna, if that's where we are, I think, then I would say, let's put it out for public comment. Let's decide if it's ready to go to public comment and get public comment. But if we need to have more time to discuss it, let's discuss it. Do we think that it might be ready to go out for public comment? Maybe, I don't know.
Needs like 10 more minutes.
Okay, so we're gonna do.
It's 1:31.
I know,
Yep,
I know.
I move to adjourn meeting,
if you have to, we move to table this conversation.
move to table short-term rental discussion.
I second.
All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Okay, adjourn.
I second that.
Okay, so the movement to table were from Angela and then a second by Tyson, same with the motion to adjourn. Motion by Angela, seconded by Tyson. Motion to adjourn, all in favor?
I.
Aye. Woo! We knew these were gonna be big, you guys. We knew they